Well, hello there, watching the press preview. A first look then at what is on the front pages. Time to see what is making the headlines with The Guardian's deputy political editor, Jessica Elgot, and the deputy editor of Conservative Home, Henry Hill. Welcome to both of you. No surprises, of course. As you might expect, the Financial Times previews tomorrow's budget, Jeremy Hunt's first as Chancellor, in which he is expected to increase investment in businesses in what's being described as a budget for growth. Crying out for help, that's the front of the Mirror, a message to the Chancellor to be fair to those who need it most. Similarly, The Telegraph leads with Hunt faces revolt over tax rise in budget. The Guardian highlighting the £4 billion worth of childcare funding expected to be announced for the parents of 1- and 2-year-olds in England. The Times says more free childcare to get parents back in jobs. The Eye also focusing on childcare and the expected announcement of an extra 30 hours a week for toddlers. As does the Daily Mail, the headline free preschool childcare in back-to-work budget. Meanwhile, the Express calls it Hunt's carrot and stick to get Britain growing. And with its tongue firmly in cheek, City AM says, let's hope this one goes better than Liz and Kwasi's. A budget for growth, though, the title there. The Metro has the story of the American drone downed by a Russian fighter jet over the Black Sea near Ukraine. Come on to that a bit later on. Just a reminder, though, by scanning the QR code you'll see on screen during the programme, you can check out the front pages of tomorrow's newspapers while you watch us. So let's head straight to Jessica and Henry. Lots to talk about with a budget for growth. It had been billed as a budget for work or to get people back to work. And Jessica, part of that, many of the papers picking up on, is the help for childcare, which many parents would say is desperately needed.
Yeah, so this was a story that we broke this afternoon, and the Treasury seems to have given everybody else the nod that it's right, and that this is something he'll announce tomorrow, a £4 billion expansion of free childcare for 1- and 2-year-olds. At the moment, a lot of parents don't get any help at all for 1- and 2-year-olds. Some of the poorest households do get some help for 2-year-olds, but it's only really at 3 that those free hours kick in. And this plan would give 30 hours a week, the same as parents of 3-year-olds get to 1- and 2-year-olds, increase funding as well for providers, which is a big ask of the sector, because essentially they've been saying, while the Treasury's been mulling on these plans, we're not paying our staff enough, you're not paying enough for these free hours, and therefore providers are having to close because of that. So it's a costly thing to do if you're going to up how much you pay the providers and expand how many free hours you give to parents. But it's a huge boost. It will save many, many families hundreds of pounds a month.
Yes, providers having to close or charge parents the nominal extra, if you like, to top up because the money the government gives isn't quite enough. The Times also picking up on that, more free childcare to get parents back in jobs. How will people feel about this as a giveaway policy, do you think, Henry?
Well, I think for the reasons that Jess set out, it will obviously be popular. Childcare is something that a lot of people struggle with. And if the government's priority is getting people back into the workforce, then providing more support for parents to allow them to do that is obviously a good thing. I think this is another example, though, of just how the Treasury having to spend lots of money to make up for this what should be easier policy decisions that they just won't make, right? Because ultimately, Liz Truss tried to slightly deregulate childcare, bringing the number of children an individual carer could look after down to the norms in that distant country, Scotland. And that has continually failed every time it's been attempted, and therefore this is more expensive. And therefore, despite huge pressures on the public purse, the fact that they're going to have to deliver these public sector pay rises at some point and all the rest of it, they're having to throw £4 billion at this policy. Will it be enough to actually make this sustainable over the long term? I don't know, but it is a good retail offer, and it does matter to people. But it's fundamentally a sign of pumping more money we don't really have into a system that politicians are afraid to reform.
Yes, and the details of this, the Times tells us that Hunt believes that childcare is key to unlocking growth, and under the plans, the free childcare will be available to all parents of children aged 1 and 2, provided they earn less than £100,000 each and both parents work for 16 hours a week. At present, the 30 hours of free childcare offer is only available to parents of those aged 3 and 4. So certainly bringing it down the age range and encouraging those with younger children to head back to work earlier. That the budget for work, or driving people back to work, he has said in his statement this evening, will focus on disabled people, those with long-term health conditions, parents, as we've discussed, the over 50s, as we discussed last night because of the pensions changes, and also people on universal credit. But the main thrust of it, as we head to the Financial Times, is to unveil a budget for growth. Now, you might say that's something of a sop to the Trussites who are smarting about the corporation tax increases which are due, Jessica.
Yeah, and this is and they're also, that you're not seeing those kind of big headline tax cuts that a lot of Tory MPs do want to see. I think you will see I think a little bit more of the kind of Truss budget, and perhaps in a kind of slimmed down version than we might have expected to be resurrected. So there will be some of that deregulation for housing, the very niche nutrient neutrality, which many Tory MPs blame, a hangover from EU law that seems to stop some housing getting built. Investment zones, we remember them from the other budget. So there is stuff that was in it that is kind of finding its way back into the Treasury's thinking. But one of the things that is not for moving, so it seems, is this plan to increase corporation tax from 19 to 25%, and to end that super deduction, which was offering big tax relief, extra tax relief on companies' purchases. So I think we're going to get something to replace that, but still, it's something that Tory MPs say is one of the things that holding back growth, holding back foreign companies from investing in the UK.
Yes, Daily Express talks about Hunt's carrot and stick to get Britain growing and working. In the Treasury announcement tonight, the changes are expected to encourage benefit claimants to move into work or increase their hours, with increased sanctions enforcement and work coach support, and the childcare costs on universal credit to be paid up front. But if we go to the Daily Telegraph and pick up on the complaints about corporation tax and the failure to reduce taxes, the Telegraph is talking, Henry, about a revolt. Tell us what that might be. He's saying suggestion that the levy on companies, the corporation tax increase, will have a chilling effect on the economy, the opposite of growth.
Yeah, well, so there's sort of two sides to this. The political side is that, yes, the Trussites, and there are still, quite a lot of them, are smarting from the very abrupt nature, shall we say, of her premiership and the decision by Rishi Sunak and Jeremy Hunt to move away from her vision. And they truly believe that conservatism means delivering lower taxes, and that will drive growth. And so they're going to try and put pressure on the government. But I think the other issue is just that, we hear this is going to be a budget for business. And yet, a lot of the headline issues coming out so far are not particularly business friendly. Whatever you think of the increase in corporation tax rates, that's not pro-business. Ending the super deduction is not pro-business, even if it is replaced with full expensing, which basically means that companies can claim, I think, 100% of the value of the capital investments they make against tax. And there are things that the Treasury could do. They could, for example, raise the threshold at which small businesses have to register for VAT. Currently, there's a huge clustering effect of businesses which are deliberately not growing because they don't want to have to start charging VAT to their existing customers. If you raised that, you would allow SMEs to grow. And we haven't yet seen much of that either, because there's a fundamental tension between the Treasury's need to get revenue in and the idea of, if you give the companies some rope now, then they will generate growth, and that growth will pay off in 1, 2, 5 years' time. So I think a lot of Conservatives are concerned. Yes, some of them are just angry Trussites, but others are concerned that actually it's very easy to say the word growth. Every politician says the word growth. You're not going to find many politicians who don't like growth in theory. But, there's a reason we haven't had it for so long, and that's because an awful lot of the policies that actually militate against growth are individually very popular. And this housing thing is actually just another example. Instead of just scrapping this requirement that the EU courts came up with, they're coming up with a complicated balancing and trade-off scheme. Now, yes, that might help, but that's still going to involve more costs for councils, more costs for planners, more costs in the process. And it's going to mean that we're still behind on house building where we were before that judgment was handed down.
Yeah, the City AM picks up on a budget for growth with that comment. Let's hope this one goes better than Liz and Kwasi's. And certainly in his statement, Jeremy Hunt suggested that the autumn statement last year was to bring stability, and this one is to bring growth. And just very quickly, the Daily Mirror, Jessica, just very, very quickly if you can, because the backdrop to all of this, of course, is strikes in multiple sectors, public sector staff going off.
Yeah, and it points out that there isn't anything identified so far for public sector workers, although there is a settlement that will come for them for this next year. But there's big strikes going on tomorrow, tube, teacher strikes, and it's not a great, the backdrop of that industrial strife is not a great one.
OK, lovely and brief. Thank you very much indeed. Overrunning, as you can see. Lots more still to come, though. A major diplomatic incident as a Russian fighter jet shoots down an American drone. Not shoots down, apologies, nudges it. Anyway, we'll discuss that next. Well, welcome back. You're watching the press preview with me once again, Jessica Elgot and Henry Hill. Henry, pick up, if you can, on the front page of the Metro then, the incident of the 2 Russian jets and the US unmanned drone over the Black Sea.
Yeah, so this story is sort of remarkably on brand for what we've learned about Vladimir Putin's war machine, because you originally hear it and you think, oh my God, the Russians have shot down an American drone. And then you read on and you find that actually what happens is they flew into it. But basically, this highlights the 2 Russian jets have impacted with an American drone, and this highlights the very serious danger that there is about escalation, because fundamentally both countries have assets in the area. Obviously, Russia is busy invading Ukraine, but America isn't on the ground, but is in the air over the Black Sea. And this is exactly the kind of thing that people who are worried about Vladimir Putin and what he could do are worried about, because they don't want to see America and the Western NATO countries, which have so far held a very firm line against directly intervening for all the support they've given Ukraine, getting dragged step by step into a direct confrontation with Russia. Now, this is an isolated incident, and there's no sign so far that either country is intending to escalate, but it is a sign of the huge stakes that there are in that part of the world.
Lots of inside pages on that. Many papers have bumped it off, obviously, for the budget. But page 2 of the Mirror has the Russian jet, but it also has this down its right-hand side, the news that Boris Johnson will give evidence on Partygate. You know, some people suggesting a marathon grilling is what he's due, Jessica.
Yeah, and we saw a couple of weeks ago, or a lot early last week, that the Privileges Committee has got a lot of very, very difficult things to put to Boris Johnson, including from testimony it's taken from people inside his Downing Street, and this will be televised. Boris Johnson has seen lots of that evidence, so we can see how those MPs are going to grill him on the committee, and what answers he's got to some of the new revelations that have come out.
Jessica, Henry, thank you both very much indeed. Plenty to talk about tonight, certainly. We will see you for more in the 11. More details, obviously, of the budget. Right now, though, let's take a look at the weather.